Welcome to Voices Amped. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ellie Clark.
And I'm Vanessa Becker-Weig, and we are your hosts. Voices Amped is a place for us to share space and lift the voices of artists, activists, community leaders, and organizers, all of whom have inspired us and our work.
For any ampers who aren't familiar with our work, we are Voices Amplified, formerly known as the Girl Project. You can learn more about our arts advocacy work or support us by going to voicesamplified.net. Thanks for listening, and remember, be curious, be courageous,
take up space, and make some noise.
On this week's episode, we would love to thank our $1,500 plus sponsors, the entrepreneurs, Darius and Renee Patimi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you. Thank you.
We have been awarded a 2021 Arts Match grant from Fund for the Arts. Look for our crowdfunding page at fundforthearts.org. That's one word, fundforthearts.org. Today on the podcast, we are inspired through conversation with one of our stellar Girl Project alumnus from 2014, Rena Childers. Rena talks with us about her work in the political arena with campaigns like Senator Jon Osoff and Charles Booker. We also talk about her volunteer work with Planned Parenthood, plus the challenges of transitioning from high school to college to entering the workforce in a pandemic. Welcome and thanks for listening. This is Voices Amped. I'm Vanessa Becker-Weig.
And I'm Ellie Clark, and we are your hosts.
We are so excited to introduce you all to another one of our badass Girl Project alumni, Rena Childers. Rena currently works for a political media firm in DC. This past election cycle, she helped produce ads for Senator Jon Osoff and the DCCC House Majority PAC and a number of other Democratic organizations and candidates. Rena graduated from Pomona College in Claremont, California with a degree in international relations and affairs. She worked for Charles Booker's Senate primary campaign. During undergrad, Rena worked and volunteered for Planned Parenthood in Los Angeles and Seattle, the Kentucky Democratic Party, and a small political consulting firm in Orange County. Rena loves to write and periodically has op-eds published in the Courier Journal and Herald Leader. She is a Taurus, and according to astrology.com, a female identifying Taurus is a woman of substance who treats her body as a sacred temple. She is abundance personified, a living cornucopia in human form. You will find traits such as determination, self-reliance, and perseverance. These women are powerful forces to be reckoned with. When they set their mind to something, you can bet that it's going to happen.
Damn.
Rena, as I stated,
living cornucopia.
I mean, that sets you up quite a bit there, Rena.
No kidding. High stakes.
She is one of our alumni of the class of 2014 of the Girl Project, our second year. Can you believe that?
I really can't. That was so many years ago. I think back, that was like 7 years ago now, and I could have been yesterday. I'm so grateful to have had that experience, and I have lots to say about the Girl Project.
Your all's class, that second year, it really locked us in a way. What a special group of people. I mean, every group is, but you all were something else.
There were so many incredible women, girls at the time, women now who have just become like total icons and powerhouses, and in their own respect. I think everyone's gone on to do such different kinds of work, which is something I really valued about the experience.
That's so true. And I think as Ellie started to kind of talk about, is that like that kind of was the linchpin and continuing on, I felt like, with the program, because we kind of had the first year and it was like, okay, we're trying to figure this out. And then we got to 2014 and that it was pretty magical. And then we
Yeah.
were like, okay, I think we can make this happen. And you were just all in. So
Yeah.
all in. And that was the same year we did Jump too, I think, wasn't it, Ellie? I'm pretty sure that was that second
It
year.
was because Evan, my partner, did not get to see the 2014 The Girl Project. Which still, when
Evan.
I'm like crying and thinking and talking, Evan's like, I can't believe I missed that year. Because I remember calling him after every run through of your all's performance, and Vanessa and I were a hot mess watching you all every night, just like weeping because it was so moving. It was really one of the first times as a director. I tell Vanessa all the time how I hate directing because I don't have any control. At least when I'm acting, I'm on stage and I can try to help, but like relinquishing control. And it was one of the first directing experiences I had where I didn't have anything left to do. Like it was all you all, and no piece like made me nervous it was just amazing.
Yeah, there was something so magical, I think, about like our energy as a group also, because I've acted, I had acted for like 8 years before joining the Girl Project, but I think the like collaboration aspect and just the fact that we were focusing on so many different issues, both personal and political, not that you can really differentiate between the two, but like having these, these big conversations and then trying to kind of condense them down into performance art was such a special experience for me. And I haven't experienced anything like it since.
Well, and that was also the year we incorporated kind of a world view as well. The first year was very, inside of the United States, which there's plenty to deal with there. But then we also kind of that year started to introduce a world view. So it was a special time. What would you say are some of the biggest takeaways from your time with the Girl Project?
Well, I was going to say, coming into the Girl Project, I was 15, which is a horrible age.
It is.
A single 15-year-old that feels like they have their feet solidly on the floor. But I was coming in totally uncertain of myself. And I lacked the like basic confidence to walk down the hallway without, peering over my shoulders to see who was looking at me. And I remember my mom like kind of like dragging me to the auditions because I was like, oh no, I'm too old for this, I'm too cool for this, whatever. And then I remember like coming to the auditions and like meeting all of these girls who were from different parts of Central Kentucky. And it was my first exposure to people who like attended different schools really, and had different interests. And like right off the bat, it was like we hit it off. I connected with Lycan and with a few other girls. And after the auditions, I said, I want to be a part of this. I really hope that, they invite me back. And as soon as I joined, I felt like I had more structure kind of like guiding me through how to navigate a lot of the different issues like high schoolers face. And I think like uniquely so, because a lot of my friends were still, of course we all suffer from like body confidence issues, and I'm this is also a new part of kind of my conscious is body neutrality, which is something I wasn't familiar with before. It's this idea of like, you don't always have to feel so positive about your body in every space. Sometimes you can just think like, my body's a vessel that like takes my mind places. And like, that is, I think, such a captivating idea for me. And it was something like, of course, it wasn't coined that at the time, but it was something that we really talked about. It's like, I am so valuable to every space, to every person. And it just gives you this like boost that you carry with you, I think, far beyond the Girl Project.
Is there anyone that do you keep in contact with anybody? Do you still have any relationships with anyone?
Well, Carly, my cousin, of course, for
Yes.
different reasons. But we talk all the time about the Girl Project and about our experiences with the Girl Project. Not really, but I would love to reconnect with everybody. Next time I'm in Lexington, I would love to like form some kind of communication chain.
Yeah, or a reunion. That would be
that would be
amazing.
so wonderful. That would be so wonderful.
we still have several folks from your class that are still, pretty engaged in what's going on. We'll have Lexi on here in a few weeks, who's going to be on with another slam poet in the area, and they're going to do slam poetry together. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Lexi is so great. I see her. We still follow each other on social media, and I see all of the political work and like personal work she's doing, and it's really just spectacular.
It's
Fierce.
good
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, do you feel like, let's see, you're what, 23 now? 22. Do you feel like the climate in high schools has improved any since you left high school? Do you have any knowledge of that? Do you feel like it's any different?
That's something I've thought about a little bit. I worked for Planned Parenthood in Seattle my sophomore year of college. So I was 19, 20 at the time. And we kind of developed like different sex ed curriculums. And obviously that's a very small portion of your education in high school. But it was my first like real chance to talk to high schoolers again. And I felt like it was a mixed bag. I think with like more social media and especially TikTok and these like instantly gratifying platforms, I think young people are expected to perform in a way that maybe we weren't. But I also think that people are much more willing to have open, frank conversations about mental health. And that's something that I definitely did not experience in my high school, and I wish that I had. So I'm encouraged. I think we're moving in the right direction, but there are definitely situations that kind of, I don't know, challenge high schoolers in a way that we just didn't face.
Do you feel like that had any effect on transitioning to college? Like, was there anything you felt like you weren't prepared for as you were heading into college that you wish maybe your school or even your parents, friends, anyone would have prepared you for?
I had a really difficult transition into college. So I moved from Kentucky to Los Angeles, and obviously like just culturally, that's, definitely a change of pace. But I struggled a lot with my mental health, like my freshman and sophomore year of college. And I didn't even know the appropriate terminology. Like I didn't know what like anxiety encompassed and what depression encompassed. And a lot of these feelings that I had since I was like a young child, like later I found out could be ascribed to these different conditions. And so like it took me a long time to like internalize that it was okay to express myself and be like open and honest about my anxiety. And then just culturally, it was a really tricky transition because people came from all over the world, which is one of the kind of beauties of my college experience. Like my best friends are from Brazil, Turkey, Ghana, like all these fantastic places that I hadn't even thought of visiting before I went to college. And so that was like a really enriching part of the experience, but it also kind of threw everything up into question and gave me like a real opportunity to think through some of the things that I had just like assumed were fact.
Do you feel like that's the depression and anxiety transitioning into college as a freshman and sophomore, did you find that was a pretty common thing around you?
Oh yes, absolutely. Almost everybody I know struggled with some form of anxiety or depression. And I wish, even on my campus, which is very progressive, and very like we had like mental health advocates on campus, but it's still really taboo and it's still stigmatized. And I think it's difficult when you want to present this like perfect image to whomever you're speaking to. But like, your mind is racing. You have these like coursing, difficult thoughts. And so I wish that there had been like more frank conversations as a young person with my parents. And like depression runs in my family, and this was something I didn't know until I went to college. And it's like, of course, it's like everyone struggles, and I think that more kind of transparency would have benefited me and all of my friends, because of course, the way you interact with the world affects your friends.
Absolutely. And I appreciate all that you're saying there. I know, and I don't think he would mind, but my son definitely struggled, specifically his freshman year last year. And I wish I would have had those conversations to prepare him a little bit more. And I'm finding the more I'm hearing how it really is. There's something that's not quite connecting in the high school experience right now because it is happening a lot. And especially after this pandemic, I think it's really going to have another huge effect on juniors and seniors in high school and then transitioning into
Absolutely.
college without a doubt. So what made you interested in pursuing your degree, and did that degree then spark your political interests, or were the political interests already there and then that's why you decided to pursue your degree?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I like to say, and this isn't entirely true, we can, nuance it for sure, but I like to say that like I was a two-dimensional person in high school. Like it was like, I was told things and I received them, and sometimes I internalized them, but a lot of it was like I just mimicked what was kind of around me. And I think going to college was the first time, one of the first times when I was really like forced to decide what I like to do to study. And I came in, sure that I was going to be an international relations major. And then I took like an astrophysics class and loved it. I took an English class and loved it. Anthropology, loved it. And international relations, I ended up like coming full circle a year and a half later and landing on international relations. But as I was kind of doing work and doing research, I realized that like I believe strongly in the importance of like hyper local movements and like grassroots, like people powered movements, and that's a lot easier to achieve on a small scale. And so for me, that was when I kind of decided like politics, like if I focus on domestic issues, of course they have reverberating effects on the world, but domestic issues are really where my heart is. And so that was like around my junior year, I moved back to Kentucky for the summer and worked for the Kentucky Democratic Party. And yeah, just like fell in love with this like whole grassroots, all of these grassroots movements, and particularly like Southern grassroots movements.
Mm-hmm. Can you, I'm curious about your work with Planned Parenthood and how or if that has kind of informed any of your career paths, or how it's informed the work that you're doing today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been like a huge advocate for reproductive justice issues kind of my whole life. It's always been an area of interest for me. But I really dug in my freshman year. I joined our local chapter at my college and in my community. And pretty quickly, I realized that it was totally where my heart was. And I joined the leadership team and ended up taking over as president my junior year. And we had a huge chapter. We had like over 500 people on our mailing list, like 150 people showed up for all of the meetings. And it was just like really inspiring to see all of these young people like recognizing what went wrong kind of in their education and like where there's room for improvement. And I took that knowledge with me to Seattle, where I worked for the affiliate there. And that was really interesting because of course we focused on different issues. Each geographic area really like requires you learn about different issues. And then I came back to LA and worked as a volunteer lead in Pomona Valley, the area where my school was located. And then ended up, taking over as president of my chapter at the school. And I learned so much during that process. I also learned how difficult it is to work for a nonprofit organization. And I know I'm preaching to the choir probably, but it is really tricky. We face different impediments and different obstacles than you do with like a political organization, a for-profit organization. And so that's kind of something that also I've been thinking about lately, is like, what's the most effective way to enact change? And I think like everybody has a different approach, which is beautiful because we have to be thinking divergently. But I'm kind of in the process right now in my career of deciding, like, there are these issues that I care so passionately about, but how do I most effectively, enact change?
I'm interested in what you think the differences are, like between a political movement and what you're talking about with a not-for-profit. And I just have to say that I become horrified and defensive and angry, like a flare of temper, which I guess I have often enough, but not wildly. Evan really is the only one who really sees it. Maybe Vanessa sometimes. But when people talk about Planned Parenthood, I mean, that organization saved my life. I was uninsured in New York for 10 years as an artist, and I always had a place to go for my pap smears. I always had a place to go if anything that came up. And haven't experienced better doctors who are more knowledgeable and lovely, and to make Planned Parenthood this singular idea of abortion, pro-life, pro-choice, when they are supporting women in such a huge way. So I just have to say that because I want to have a whole podcast about that. So just that you're working with them makes we're working with them, makes my heart really happy. But I'm interested to know what you find the differences to be and why it's so much more challenging in a not-for-profit to make things happen than it is in a political
scene. Well, to preface, I want to say that like I've also had personal and professional experiences with the staff at Planned Parenthood, and they are incredible. And I think a lot of it's tricky depending on where you are in the country. Like some of these conversations are really difficult when you're having like, community sessions, forums, tabling, like any kind of outreach effort. It's really difficult to change people's minds, but I think it's really important also to like elevate stories like yours, Ellie. It's like so many people, and particularly women, are uninsured, and Planned Parenthood offers like basic preventative healthcare services. And people don't know that. People are like, oh, well, they only deal in abortions. And yes, they do deal in abortions, but that's like 1% of the services they provide. Yeah. They also provide like therapy, counseling, STI checks, birth control, like anything you could possibly, like even like diabetes checks, like anything you could possibly, look for in a doctor. It's a great resource. So I have, I could go on and on about my love for the organization, but to your question, it's changed. I've worked now for like most of the sectors, most like nonprofit, for-profit, and political, which falls somewhere in between. And with nonprofit work, I found that the burnout rate is so high because often like there's a lack of work-life balance, and the funding, of course. Yeah, and of course the funding is, not totally ample for a lot of lifestyles. And so I think people struggle to stay like motivated by the same issues when the rest of their life isn't as full as they'd like it to be. And of course, like, when I stopped working for Planned Parenthood, I didn't stop caring about reproductive justice. I care about it just as much, if not more, than I did. But it's now kind of thinking about other ways to like expand people's access to healthcare. And so like in my current work, I work for a political media firm, and we do a host of things, but part of it involves like, well, the pay is better. So that's a nice part. But it's also like we're still working on, political issues and still trying to change people's minds and persuade people to like be open to conversations, difficult political conversations, and hopefully like mind-changing political conversations. Like it just depends on the specific organization you're working for, but in my experience, nonprofits have been a less sustainable like model for me personally.
It's tough.
But they're so important. And so it is really tough because like you can't have you can't only be working one way to change a situation. You have to be coming at it from every single angle. And so like part of the work, also political work, is like funding these organizations and making sure like donating to these organizations, like elevating these organizations so that people can continue doing the important work, the important groundwork.
Speaking of important work, talk about your time working on the Charles Booker campaign.
Oh my God, that was like the best time of my life. It was so fantastic.
You're the
I,
communications officer?
yes,
Is that
as a
right?
communications officer. Yeah, it was a short stint. It was only from May to June, unfortunately. But it was such an exciting campaign to be a part of. I've volunteered for campaigns in the past, but this was my first like paid campaign position. And I was totally inspired by him and by the movement he's trying to create. And I really think like having worked for Jon Osoff this last cycle, I think that like Reverend Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff and Stacey Abrams, who is an absolute icon, they're trying to build this like unified Southern movement from the ground up in the same way that Charles Booker was. So I see a lot of like parallels there and opportunities for real collaboration there. But yeah, working for Charles Booker was fantastic. It was interesting because I was really intimidated coming into the office because I was in person for a week. But coming into the office, I was scared to death to meet him. He was this like, I'd put him on a total pedestal and he couldn't have been nicer, couldn't have been more inspiring. It was like so encouraged me to write on my own time, just, was speaking absolute words of wisdom to me. And I really just appreciated my time with the campaign so much. And his new organization, From the Hood to the Holler, the nonprofit, is really a great resource for anybody who's, wanting to get involved with a similar movement.
That's so exciting. Did the work that you did there, did that lead you to the work with Jon Ossoff? Or how did you get there from point A to point B?
Right. Well, there was a scary gap there for about a month where I was unemployed, like everybody else right now. And I was struggling to figure out what I wanted to do. But my former boss in Anaheim, Orange County, reached out to me and said, I have this friend that lives in DC and she is like a communications person and she'd be willing to talk on the phone with you. And we had this great conversation, totally lively. She couldn't have been more generous with her knowledge. And she said, well, actually, my firm is hiring right now. So if you're looking for an opportunity, like it might not be the perfect fit, but it's a great kind of segue. And I not auditioned, I interviewed for it. Yeah, in theater mode.
Kind of auditioning.
It's kind of auditioning. But yeah, I interviewed for it and moved within like 2 weeks. And it was just really an exciting process. But it is a similar kind of work where we only work with progressive Democrats, and we produce advertisements and manage like campaign websites, press releases, speeches, things.
So quick question, will Charles Booker run again?
Yes, I think so.
Great.
I think so.
And next question, when you were working with this media firm in Ossoff here in Atlanta, where I am, it was so exciting. That win was so exciting. Were you in Atlanta at all? Did you get to meet Jon Osoff or Raphael Warnock, Reverend Warnock?
I did meet Jon Osoff, but I was not in Atlanta. But I'm hoping that in the future I will be, because he'll be running again in 6 years. So, yeah. But yeah, I wonder what it was like on the ground in Atlanta. I'm sure you can speak to this better than.
It was, I live in Fulton County, so it was much more fun here probably. And it, just from the social movement happening and the uprising that we were coming off of into this election, it just felt like, to me, it felt unstoppable. Like I was so proud to go vote. And then I was so proud to get to go back and vote a second time. Right. And it was hard for me because it's weird to live in Kentucky, right? Where no matter how often I voted, I didn't get my way. And Ohio was more of a swing state. And I was, quite frankly, devastated when it went to Trump. And shocked. I was really shocked. I remember weeping in my Meisner class. The whole group was it was overwhelmingly disappointing. And And I cried for the Girl Project, pretty much. I was like, I'm a liar. I told these girls that their voice matters and they count and they will be taken care of. And here this man is who is talking about grabbing people by the pussy. I need to not get too political, but it was devastating. And then we're in Georgia, and I'm in this state that I assume is a lot like Kentucky, right? Where it's going to go red. It's a red state. And to be here in a time where it was right on that line. I mean, I was glued to the television just to see Biden take the state and to see those two men and to listen to Reverend Warnock talk, speak is one of the most moving experiences. So it felt really amped up, to use our podcast name. Like the whole, you could feel it amped up, and you could see that people's minds had changed. When it went to Biden, they were like, oh shit, maybe our vote does count. Maybe Stacey Abrams is
onto
changing the world. Yeah. And it happened. It felt like a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so great to hear. That's exactly what we had hoped would happen. But yeah, no, I think it was interesting because like the DNC and the Democratic establishment has kind of given up on a lot of these states. And like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this because I am sort of part of the establishment, but I'm gonna say it. Like, I think that a lot of like Southern states that typically go red, people have given up on them. And it's been clear like this last cycle that there's a lot of potential there. There's so many people that care about these issues and that like want to be advocates for, you know, like higher wages, like greater employment, climate reform, all of these issues that we care so passionately about, and that affect everybody in this country. Like I think it's a rebranding issue also, is that the Democratic Party, yeah, I won't make this too political, but the Democratic Party in general has had like a messaging issue where they've been unable to kind of like capture the emotions of a lot of people in like, yeah, rural Southern areas. And I think like, especially in like economically disenfranchised areas, like Democratic platforms, like issues really lend themselves to economic disenfranchisement. So I think that this is like, there's something going on right now where people are really becoming aware of like the hypocrisy in the Republican Party and of just the opportunity for like real sustainable grassroots, like ground up change.
To hear you talk like this is just terribly exciting to me. And you know, I feel very fortunate that I have children that are also very passionate about all of these things. But sometimes I do feel like I am in my little bubble because I know that there are a lot of young people your age who are not getting out there and getting to the polls. What do you think? Do you think that that there are some things that we can do better to make that happen?
This is something I've thought a lot about, and Ellie and I were kind of talking about this earlier, but I think that there has been like a little bit of a miscommunication in the sense that like this has been ascribed to apathy. Like people for so long, political strategists and pollers and people have said like, oh, young people are just apathetic. They don't care about these issues. But this summer, it was clear that that's not the case. Like when you are willing to actively engage young people and like hold them and value their opinions and elevate their voices, I think people care so much about these issues. Like we're creating a future for ourselves and we want to make sure everybody's included. And so I think that more than apathy, it's just like voter disenfranchisement and voter suppression. It's like young people live these really, you know, like fluid lifestyles, often, you know, attend college away from home, which creates a lot of issues for like getting your ballot delivered. And the fact that we don't have pre-registration and early registration, absentee voting, like when you're willing to put the work in to expand the voting electorate in a real significant way, people show up. People like are engaged, and especially young people of color. Like they absolutely carried this last election, particularly in Georgia. And I think that that's not like recognized enough, and like it's not invested in enough. in like a strong enough way.
And the fact that we have our first, I mean, what I've heard from a lot of young people is nobody looks like me. Nobody speaks to me. Nobody cares about me. Engage me, activate me, and I'll vote for you. But I'm not just going to go vote because, um, and to see, I mean, the shocking truth that Kamala Harris is the first woman, not to mention woman of color, in the position she's in. We've never had a female president. I mean, it's fascinating.
Right.
And
It's
confusing.
exciting. And it also like reminds people that they can run for office, which I think is like so important to instill in young people, is that like your voice matters, first of all, and your vote matters. And like you can begin like fostering these conversations and like really thinking about how you feel about these issues in a way that will lend itself to you running for office one day. And I hope that like these young people who are even younger than me do run for office, especially in Kentucky. I think Emerge Kentucky actually is a really great resource for this.
What is
Emerge Kentucky?
They basically encourage like young women and women of all ages to run for office, and they provide them the tools they need to be successful. And they've had, a number of successes. Our current lieutenant governor, Jacqueline Coleman, is a Emerge graduate. So,
oh wow, are you going to run for office?
We'll see. It's way down the line. No, I'm kind of thinking through my like personal career path right now, and yeah, there's a lot of like uncertainty for me for the future, but I know that I'm motivated by all of these issues, and I know that I have these role models who I look up to, and who I want to emulate.
As someone who's involved in politics, did you find the time, or were you able to get involved in anything with the social justice uprisings? Were you part of any protests or anything like that? Were you able to get involved in that way?
Yes, definitely. This summer I attended like most of the protests in Lexington. And it was really exciting to see all these people like recognizing that police brutality against like brown and Black people, is another public health crisis. Like it's something that we need to be dedicating ourselves to like every single day. And then later, as my work schedule got more hectic, I started donating, because I realized that like while I'm not able to be there in person, like I can show up in other ways. And I think that's something also that older folks who maybe like aren't as physically able to be a part of the protests, or who just aren't quite sure what's the like best way to enter into the movement, it's like a great opportunity to do so is to donate. And I have lots of suggestions that I can provide after for places to donate. But I think that that's like we were talking about funding earlier. That's a really important part of a lot of these like efforts.
And we will definitely take those from you for our amped action. That's great.
Yeah.
So, okay, so with the politics that you're privy to, and participating in protests and all of the social justice work that you do, how do you find time to take care of yourself? Because that must take an emotional toll on you.
It's a work in progress.
Aren't we all?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I am now able to, because the election is over, I'm able to kind of find some more time to just like recenter. And I go to yoga, which is a great opportunity for me to like physically de-stress. But it's tricky to figure out, because there's always something to be done, and it feels like there's always like a new movement to familiarize yourself with and to become a part of. And it's really tricky to like find that kind of like work-life balance, the elusive work-life balance that everyone so desperately seeks. And I think it'd be dishonest to say that I've discovered the key to it, but I definitely have like cook myself dinner every night, which is really a nice time to like reground by myself. And this summer was really emotionally taxing for me, and definitely for all of my peers. And so, after that, it makes me want to like dig in and do more because I feel like every time, I have these hard conversations, I realize how little I know and how much like there is left to discover. And how many of my friends are great resources. And so I'm, still working on the personal boundaries aspect of it too. But everything is political. Like the personal is political. I don't think that you can really differentiate the two. And the only way I've kind of found sanity is like investing in my relationships and encouraging my friends to take time for themselves in the same way that I try to.
And what do you and your friends like to do for fun?
We go on hikes a lot. I actually just went on a beautiful hike yesterday. And lots of like wine nights. We cook dinner together pretty often. Attend yoga classes. I've started running. It's like new for me, but I'm enjoying it. I'm going really slowly and for very short distances, but I'm enjoying it a lot. And yeah, that's about it.
As a young person who seems to be very in the know,
and very mature. Were you this mature?
No, not at all.
You're 22. This is
really not
easy.
Not at all.
And also, I do think that the pandemic has had an effect on everything in my life, but has also forced me to kind of be still for the first time in as long as I can remember. I'm somebody that likes to travel a lot. I like to kind of be on the go. It's like a running joke with my family and friends that I'm like constantly in movement. And I've been forced during this period to spend time just by myself. And it's been both really wonderful and also difficult, I think. And I moved to a city also where I knew only a few people. DC, I didn't have a big social network in DC. And so I've been kind of slowly and, COVID cautiously building a group there. But I'm valuing my time alone. I'm really enjoying, watching TV, reading. I've been reading a ton, knitting, crafting, just like every other millennial Gen Zer. But it's been like it's been a time of kind of like grounding for me.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can only imagine the complication of moving to a new city and trying to create a network, a social network, and it's during COVID. That certainly complicates things a bit. So as someone who is in the know, where do you get your news? Like, what do you listen to?
Good question.
I listen to The Daily like every day with Michael Barbero. And I also, a New York Times is a kind of a classic one for me. The Washington Post, because I'm right there. Vice on occasion, Vox on occasion. And then local papers. I'm a huge proponent of supporting local papers, local journalism. The Herald, I'm subscribed to. The Courier, the Alexandria Times, which is where I'm located now. But I'm always willing to accept suggestions because I'm looking to diversify my news outlets a bit right now. I'm kind of in this funny phase where I'm living in a place where people have such different political affiliations. And for the past 4 years, I've been in Los Angeles in this like hyper progressive area, which I've loved and I've learned so much from my peers. But I'm now kind of forced to really like reckon with some of these ideas that I had just taken as fact for the past 4 years. And I am looking to kind of like diversify some of my news sources so that I can have more honest, full conversations with people.
Wow.
So if you have any suggestions.
So mature.
Well, I've been really enjoying All Sides. Is that what it's called? All Sides, which we talked about during the election. But on Instagram, they'll post left, center, and right, and just show you the different headlines and how they're telling the same story. And it's really interesting to see how once can be so dramatically with just the way the heading is phrased, and And so I've been interested in watching those comparisons just so I see how much reporting and how much American media culture is fueling a lot of this divide that we're experiencing.
Yeah, this is something I'm thinking a lot about right now, is like how to overcome partisanship. And it's a really difficult question. I mean, so many factors are at play. But like my work currently, it's kind of like persuasion oriented. And so we're trying to reach out to these audiences who might not be so willing to listen. And it's really difficult. I mean, it gets back to this idea of like rebranding the Democratic messaging strategy. Is like, we don't need to be alienating people necessarily. We need to be embracing people and trying to have really hard conversations when you're in a privileged position to do so. So like, you know, it shouldn't be the responsibility of like Black and brown people in America to have conversations about like racial issues. Like, it should be like our responsibility. And so I think it's trying to put yourself out there and trying to really like make emotional appeals to people who you know disagree with you without totally expending all of your personal resources, like all of your, I don't know, personal energy too.
How do you navigate social media? I mean, you're somebody who works in media relations, and you know, we've talked quite a bit before on our podcasts and personally about the social network, and just how, you know, I it makes me crazy, social media, to be honest with you, but at the same time there's so many positives that I have gained from it. And as far as promoting or any kind of marketing, you have to use it. That's the best way to reach people that we've found. What are your thoughts on that? The ups, the good sides, the bad sides of social media?
It's very easy. I think you have to be wary of social media because it's so easy to enter into these tiny bubbles with people who think the same way you do, and are biased in the same way that you're biased. And so like, this gets back to the diversifying your news sources. It's like, you should use social media to amplify messages of like organizers and of these people who are well educated on issues. But when somebody, you know, and it's important that everyone has a platform to voice their opinions, but you want to make sure that the opinions that you're really like absorbing are rooted in fact. And I think that's really difficult when, you know, there's like somebody retweets a headline that maybe doesn't tell the full story. But I love consuming social media for like personal reasons too, just for fun. I've curated this like Twitter feed over years of being a part of Twitter. It's mostly just comedy and then some politics. But I think it's important, like, for young people to take the time to like read articles and to not just retweet without a second thought, because you know, that's when like news bubbles emerge. But it's a tricky issue. Yeah, it's a tricky issue.
Do you want to, for our listeners, tell us your Instagram handle? So if people are listening and like, I want to follow this girl.
Yeah, absolutely. Rena May 16 is my Instagram handle. Also friend me on Facebook, because I have I usually kind of spout political opinions mostly on Facebook, and on Twitter, just Rena May 16 as well.
And May is M-A-E, correct?
M-A-Y.
It is M-A-Y? Okay,
yes.
great.
Yeah, no, I'd be more than happy to continue this conversation also online with anybody who's interested.
Cool.
Rena, what is your superpower?
Oh, this is a fantastic question. I think that my superpower is being able to read other people's emotions. And it's something that we don't place enough value in, I think, as a society. I'm staying with a friend right now, and she's one of the most like empathetic people I've ever met. And she like inspires me every single day to just like take note of how people are feeling and to reflect on that and then respond in a way that they will be able to like appreciate. So I'm working on that. I'm trying to foster that within myself, because the most important thing in life is relationship. So like, I think that it's essential to really invest in them and try to be able to read a room.
That's great. What's the greatest piece of advice you've ever been given?
Actually, there's a quote that I really love. It's an Eleanor Roosevelt quote. And it says, do one thing every day. Wait, I want to quote this correctly, so I'm going to check real quick to make sure I have it right. But it's, yeah, give me 1 second.
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Absolute icon. I'm sorry, I'm totally pausing it.
Is it the do we can edit?
Okay.
Is it the do one thing every day that scares you?
Yes, it is, but I want to make sure I have the exact wording right. Yes. Yeah, my favorite quote, I think, is Eleanor Roosevelt saying, do one thing every day that scares you. And it's something I've like thought about since I was probably 12 years old, is like, everything is intimidating, especially as a woman. I think it's so many women suffer from imposter syndrome. And I know I've struggled with it since I was really young. And like, I don't feel, so many people, I think, enter into spaces and don't feel like welcomed, or don't feel like worthy of being there. And I am really fighting actively against that right now, myself. And I know a lot of my peers are too. But yeah, that quote, I just always come back to it because it encourages you to take like risks and to put yourself out there. You're going to face backlash. It happens no matter who you are, no matter where you are. But the bravery required to enter into those spaces unapologetically, I think is really valuable.
Yes.
I'm curious what you're reading right now.
I'm actually in between books right now, but I just finished The Nightingale, which is a really fun read. Kristen Hanna, and Americana also, which is a classic, Chimamanda Adichie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really fantastic book. She also released a book called We Should All Be Feminists. Mm-hmm. It's just a short 40-page book based on a TED Talk she gave. And I've handed that out to like everybody I know, because it's kind of like a simple guide to like reframing the conversation and like being more kind of inclusive with the conversation.
We've used that book in our close container circle.
Really? That's amazing. Yeah, it's a fun read. It's a really fun read.
It is.
Yeah.
If you could have billboards on the highway of our country, what would they say?
Oh gosh, let me think on that. I'll come back to that. I would love to give a sufficient response. Like
keep thinking.
Yeah, we can wrap up with that. That'll be our last thing for you at the very, very end. Well, we're going to move on to our campfire section, Rena. For our listeners, the campfire is a moment for our guests to share inspiration with our listeners and us. The campfire represents storytelling in an intimate setting that is unique to the people who are present. In our activism work, we refer to this as the closed container or circling. So what are you going to share with us today, Rena?
Yeah, I have two small pieces.
Right.
So first is a quote by Alex L., who's an author and poet who I really love. And she was recently profiled by Forbes for a new book she released called After the Rain. Everybody should look into it and order a copy immediately. But she has a quote that I really love, and that I also come back to pretty regularly, which is that you are allowed to pace yourself. You are allowed to be in process. You are allowed to give yourself permission to pause. It's okay to be a work in progress. And I think that like so beautifully captures especially what it feels like to be in your, young 20s, figuring things out, no stability anywhere to be found. but to be like actively working on your self improvement. And so that's something I come back to. But I also,
Rena, I hate to tell you that even in your 40s, it doesn't get any better. So just be prepared.
Nope. Right. I'm like going, wow, I need that quote. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of like wisdom in it. I think it's so easy to be really hard on yourself and to expect yourself to meet these like impossibly perfect standards. But in reality, like you're saying, like nobody can, and the best you can do is continually invest in your personal growth, go to therapy. Everybody should be in therapy, and just like really, devote your time and resources to improving yourself. And then the other one I wanted to share is it was actually from a friend of mine who was talking about seeking mental health help when she was young, and she didn't really understand what she was dealing with. And she suggested that everybody sow seeds in the dark. And I think that is such a wonderful expression, because like so much is really uncertain, especially right now with the pandemic. And I think this period has made it like particularly clear how few things we can take for granted. And like I was saying, like especially in your early 20s, it's really hard to envision a life like rooted in stability and certainty. But you know what's important to you. And like I know reproductive justice, like anti-racist work, voting rights, expanding the voting electorate, climate reform, all of these issues like mean so much to me and mean so much to like the future sustainability of like people. But the actual path to affecting change isn't always super clear. So like I've worked for these organizations with different mission statements, but they've all like approached it in different ways, and I don't know which is most effective yet, but I'm going to keep on trucking. I'm going to keep on investing, because like the work has to be done. And part of this idea for me involves like identifying role models, because the world is so dark sometimes, and to have these like beacons of light that you can turn to when you're trying to source your inspiration is really important. So like Stacey Abrams, obviously, I think she's kind of highlighted right now because everyone's appreciating all the work she did over the past decade in Georgia. But like her political work and her like vision for this unified progressive Southern movement is a huge inspiration for me. Dolores Huerta, for her bravery as like a labor organizer and civil rights activist. Jhumpa Lahiri is my favorite author, and for her written work focusing on like cultural identity, movement, travel, and love. All of these people are great sources of inspiration for me. So I think like especially young girls should spend some time really thinking about who they look up to and why they look up to these people.
Thank you for that, Rena. I am still just kind of sitting in awe of your maturity.
Very nice. That's great to hear.
I find it so difficult to not to believe so strongly in all these things. And, as an actress, but I would say a lot of people, all of my training, all of my life for what I love to do is empathy and being an empath for experiencing someone else's truth or making your best effort to. And it seems so uphill, and I find like myself, like my stomach in knots or my chest just getting so tight that I can't hardly articulate myself when it comes to some of these issues that, more and more, the more your mind is opened and the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And it's also overwhelming. And I guess I want to ask, how do you handle that? Like, how do you keep it sustainable, right? Because you can't have control over it. So how do you sustain the passion without becoming totally overwhelmed by how it makes you feel?
That's a great question. And I think you're not alone in that at all. I think especially right now, if you're not like enraged all of the time, you're not paying attention. And it's something I've thought a lot about I think part of it is like trying to maintain a work-life balance. So like when, you know, like paying attention to these issues, really investing in these issues, but also taking time off when it's necessary, and making sure you establish clear boundaries with the political organizations you're working with. But it's tricky. I think this period, especially last summer, there was so much momentum and people were engaging all of the time, like 24 hours a day with the racial justice movement. And I think it's like, that was especially obviously incredibly taxing on like Black folks who were showing up for these protests and doing the real like grunt work. But I think it's a tricky question. It affected everybody in different ways. And I won't lie and say that I have it figured out, because I get tired. I definitely get really tired, but every day you show up and you just say like, I'm going to give everything I can give to this, and also respect myself enough to establish boundaries and to say like, I can't do that today. Like I can't show up for this demonstration today. I need just a day off to think through this, maybe do some light reading and then some heavier reading. And then I'll show back up with my full force tomorrow. But yeah, it's tricky. And I think, yeah, it's really tricky. I think so much about like imposter syndrome, and I have plenty of like white straight male friends who are in this like position of trying to empathize with me. But it's a lot of work to try to explain to them. Like it's a lot of like emotional work to try to explain to them like how it feels to enter into spaces and not feel welcome. And I think like, and of course, like, yeah, it's different for everybody, but it's a privilege to feel welcome in a space. And so you need to like acknowledge that privilege and try to extend it to as many people as possible. Because not everybody has a seat at the table historically and even now. And so it's really important to like lend a hand whenever you're able to, and to educate yourself and just like really pay attention to small, like, you know, body language signs, and like to the way people are communicating how they're feeling, and to take them seriously, to believe people. Like when you know, I was at a firm for a while where I was one of a few women out of like a large number of men. And there was only one woman of color. And we talked all the time about like how difficult it was to go into meetings and propose ideas and then be shot down. And it's like, and then a lot of times like the men would respond by saying like, well, I was shot down too. And it's like, yes, but like, then you were also like boosted up in so many other ways. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a work in progress. And like, it's really difficult to, yeah, that's actually all I have to say about that. But it's hard being one of a few in a space of like a lot of people.
And healthy debate is so important, but also when you're debating something that doesn't affect you with someone who it does affect, and have a healthy debate and saying, I don't know how to tell you or debate it with you. All I can tell you is it's my experience. And
yes. And believe people, believe people when they tell you these things. It probably takes a lot of courage to like bring these things up. And so just like have faith in them, believe them.
So is that your billboard maybe?
Yeah, actually, honestly, believe everybody. Yeah. No, but really, I think it is. It's like, it's trusting people enough to bear witness to their experience. And to try to like elevate them and provide ample space for them.
Vanessa, do you have anything before I move into rapid response?
I don't think so. I'm complete. I have a lot of things that are rolling around in my head right now, Rena. Thank you.
Yeah. We're going to have to bring you back, Rena, for other conversations that we're having around stuff. Another forum of women. We need it after Vanessa's birthday forum. Okay. So you have reached fame because you are about to answer the Lipton rapid response questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
I love these. Okay. What's your guilty pleasure, Rena?
Dark chocolate.
Guilty? That's very healthy.
Dark chocolate and red wine, actually.
And together.
Yeah, especially together.
What's your favorite sound?
Mm. There's a place in East Kentucky. This isn't so quick, but near the gorge, Red River Gorge, and there's a field that I often sit in when I visit the gorge. And the sound of tobacco leaves, like in the wind, there's this like particular rustle of tobacco leaves in the wind, and it's beautiful and it smells wonderful. And it's just like, I go there sometimes mentally.
Nice.
So what's your least favorite sound?
The sound my car is currently making. The transmission is ruined on it.
Oh no.
Oh my God, that's funny. What's your favorite curse word?
Fuck. I love the word fuck.
It's so good. Everybody loves it.
It's everybody's favorite.
Say it, yeah.
If you could try any profession other than what you're doing now, what would it be?
I would be a midwife. And this is something I'm actually kind of sort of thinking about loosely. It's midwifery.
Yes.
Dang, love that.
Yeah. If you could have any superpower other than the one you told us was your superpower, what would it be?
This goes back to my like 10-year-old self dreams, but I would totally have a ring where I could transport anywhere, I would click it and just be anywhere in the world.
Oh, I want that too.
Yeah. Or I'd be able to fly, one of the two. Yeah.
Yeah, Shamara said something like, I wish I could speak every language. And
that would be so incredible. Open so many doors for you.
Yeah. Right. And just really let people be heard because you understood. It was, great. If you were to have a disclaimer, what would it say?
I apologize too frequently. This is something in Rafa's episode that I loved. She talked about just how women apologize too often for things that they are not responsible for. And I am totally guilty of that. So working on that. That should be my disclaimer for now.
Right. What do you want said about you after you're gone?
Hopefully that I make people feel welcome. I think that is something I really value in this phase of my life, especially, is that I want to make sure that everybody feels encouraged by me and feels welcome in all of my spaces, because it all comes down to relationships and like forming strong ties with people. And you can only do that by making them feel totally accepted and welcome.
So I guess that kind of answered this last question perhaps, but what brings you the most joy in your life?
My relationship with my mom, probably. She is such an inspiration to me. And I think a lot of people struggle with their relationships with their parents. And of course I've had my fair share of, fights, but I regularly come back to my relationship with my mom as like a really strong grounding force in my life, because she has like uplifted me in every moment. And I think that that's like a rare form of love. And I appreciate it every day.
So sweet. Rena, you have completely, floored us with your maturity. We've said it several times on this, and it's such a joy. It's such a joy to see you grow into the woman that you have become, and you certainly have inspired us. And I hope that you will come back and talk with us some more, especially when, you're running for your own office.
Right.
I hope you'll come back.
No, thank you all so much for having me. This has been a fantastic experience and conversation. And I am loving tuning into all of your podcasts. So I plan to continue to do so.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Thank you, listeners and our guest, for sharing the space with us. If you don't want to miss our next episode and you'd like to follow our work, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at Voices Amped. Voices Amped is part of our arts activism initiative, Voices Amplified. Our team is me, Jenny Benavides, Vanessa Becker-Weig, Ellie Clark, Dr. Margaret McGladry, and our intern and editor, Kennedy Johnson. If you have any questions that you'd like to hear from future guests, or if you ever have questions for us, hit us up on social media or email us on our website, voicesamplified.net. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, you can watch all of our interviews on YouTube if you search and subscribe to Voices Amplified. We'd like to thank Lauren Rourke for our podcast art, Tiffany DuPont Novak for our logo design, and Vanessa Davis for her beautiful underscore, I'm Doing Okay. You can follow her music at Songwriter Vanessa. We'll see you next time, everyone.
Voices Amped is generously sponsored by the Kentucky Foundation for Women. For more information about our guests, podcast content, or if you want to learn more about Voices Amplified, follow our advocacy work or support our 2021 Independence Campaign. You can visit our website voicesamplified.net or visit us on Facebook or Instagram. And remember, be curious, be courageous, take up space, and make some noise.